You've said prayers your whole life. Maybe you still do. Maybe you've sat in church pews or knelt beside your bed in the dark, speaking words upward into something you hoped was listening. And you were told that was the path. Petition, humility, submission. Ask and it shall be given. But what if the act of asking, the very posture of it, the framing of it, is doing something to you that nobody warned you about? What if there's a category of being in the Gnostic cosmological tradition whose entire function is to intercept that signal, to catch the prayer before it rises, to feed on the energetic submission underneath it, and to send back just enough silence to keep you repeating the ritual? I know how that sounds. I said it anyway. Because what happened the night I stopped praying and said a name instead, the name Noria, one of the most suppressed figures in all of Gnostic literature, changed something in how I understand the architecture of this entire cosmology. The Archons didn't ignore it. They didn't stay quiet. Something shifted. And what shifted wasn't external. That's what this video is about. We're going to cover who Noria actually is, what the Gnostic texts say about her relationship to the Archons, why invoking her name functions differently than prayer, and what happened when I tried it. Most people who've spent any time in Gnostic study have heard of Sophia. They've heard of the Demiurge. They've heard of the Archons, those subordinate rulers of the material realm who maintain the prison of ignorance the Gnostic texts describe in unflinching detail. What they haven't heard about, almost universally, is Noria. And that's not an accident. Noria appears in several Nag Hammadi texts, the collection of Gnostic codices discovered in 1945 near the town of Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt, which gave us our most direct window into what early Gnostic communities actually believed. She's present in the hypostasis of the Archons, also called the reality of the rulers. She appears in On the Origin of the World. There is an entire text dedicated solely to her, The Thought of Noria, a short but extraordinarily dense tractate that reads less like narrative and more like a compressed transmission. But here's what's strange. For a figure with her own dedicated scripture, her own cosmological function, her own relationship to the highest divine realm, Noria gets almost no popular attention. Academic treatment exists, but it's buried. Popular Gnostic channels, books, and communities reference her occasionally at best. When an important figure is both present in the primary texts and systematically overlooked in transmission, that's worth paying attention to. That's the pattern of suppression, not accident. So let's establish who she actually is, starting from the texts themselves. In the hypostasis of the Archons, Noria is introduced as the daughter of Eve, but she's immediately coded differently from the rest of humanity. When the Archons attempt to seize her, she does something no other figure in that text does. She calls out. Not in prayer, not in petition. She raises her voice directly to the highest God, the God above the Demiurge, the God the Archons themselves do not have access to. And the response is immediate. The angel Elelith descends. The Archons are rebuked. Noria is protected. Read that again because the mechanics matter. She doesn't ask through the system. She doesn't petition through the Demiurge's hierarchy. She bypasses it entirely by invoking a direct connection to the pleroma, the divine fullness that exists above and prior to this constructed material world. And the Archons react. That reaction is the detail that stopped me when I first sat with this text seriously, because it implies something the archonic system is not supposed to imply, that there are actions a human being can take that disrupt the control structure, that not everything that enters the material realm comes filtered through the Demiurge's architecture. The Thought of Noria expands this. In that short tractate, Noria is described as crying out to the Father of the All. Again, not the Demiurge, not the creator of this world, but the transcendent source that the Archons do not govern. She is told she will be inscribed in the book of the living. She is promised that her deficiency, the gnosis gap that the material world creates in every divine spark trapped within it, will be filled. Now here's where it gets cosmically significant. Noria isn't just a character. In the Gnostic symbolic structure, she functions as a type, a representative figure. The way Christ functions as a type of the awakened divine spark, Noria functions as a type of the soul that refuses to be assimilated by the archonic system. The soul that carries within it a memory of origin that no amount of material existence has fully erased. The Archons know this. That's precisely why they attempt to seize her. They're not attacking her because she's threatening in a physical sense. They're attacking her because she represents a class of human being that the control system cannot fully contain. And when you call her name, when you invoke the figure who embodies that refusal, you are not making a request to a higher power. You are doing something structurally different. You are declaring an alignment. That distinction is everything, and I want to make sure it lands before we go further. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Talk. And before we get into what happened that night, I need to establish something about the architecture of conventional prayer, because without this layer, the rest won't make the sense it needs to make. When you pray, in the mode most people inherit from mainstream religious tradition, you are doing something structurally specific. Before we continue, there's something I want to place in your hands. We've gathered the forgotten texts, the ones the Church sealed away for 17 centuries, into a single guide for those who feel the pull towards something deeper. Because whether we speak of the Archons, the Demiurge, or the Divine Spark, one truth remains. This knowledge was never meant to be lost. This is for anyone who senses there's more to this reality than we've been told, and who's ready to remember it. You'll find it in the link in the description below, or you can scan the QR code right here. I'll give you a moment to do that. You are positioning yourself as lesser in relation to something greater. You are petitioning. You are asking. The implicit grammar of the act is, I am here, you are there, I need something, please respond. Now, within Orthodox religion, that's considered humility. That's considered the proper posture before God. But the Gnostic texts look at that structure and identify something troubling inside it. The Apocryphon of John, one of the most important texts found at Nag Hammadi, a 1st or 2nd century CE document that gives us a sophisticated cosmological account of how this world was made and by whom, describes the Demiurge as a being who created this material realm and then told the souls within it that he was the only God, that there was nothing above him, that the proper relationship between a created being and its creator was worship, petition, and submission. The Apocryphon of John calls this a lie. It describes the true God, what it calls the monad, the invisible spirit, the first, as something so far beyond the Demiurge's construction that the Demiurge himself cannot perceive it. The Demiurge is not evil in a pantomime sense. He's more like a being of profound limitation who mistakes his own construction for ultimate reality and demands allegiance accordingly. Here's the problem that creates. If the being the Demiurge created this world is the being the conventional prayer system is aimed at, and the Gnostic texts suggest strongly that it is, then the act of petitioning and submission is not reaching the highest divine reality. It's reinforcing a subordinate structure. It's feeding the architecture that keeps you in the condition you're praying to get out of. Not ritual, not belief, not moral performance. The mechanism is the posture itself. I want to be careful here and precise about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that anyone who prays is doing something evil or stupid. Many people have genuinely transformative experiences inside prayer, and I'm not dismissing that. What I'm saying is that the Gnostic tradition makes a specific structural claim, that the posture of petition, aimed upward through the Demiurge's hierarchy, reinforces the very condition of separation that the divine spark inside you is trying to dissolve. The Gospel of Philip, another Nag Hammadi text, a fascinating collection of sayings and reflections that doesn't get nearly enough attention, puts it like this: People who are ignorant of the root of evil are not free of it. Ritual action performed in ignorance of what it reinforces is not neutral. It's compounding. Now, the Archons. In the Gnostic framework, the Archons are the subordinate rulers of the 7 planetary spheres, the layers of the material and psychic cosmos that a soul must pass through, both on the way in at birth and on the way out at death. Each Archon governs a particular form of limitation: ignorance, fear, desire, envy, depending on the text. Together, they constitute a system that the Gnostic tradition consistently describes as managerial rather than malevolent. They are administrators of a prison they themselves are trapped in understanding as normal. But the Archons are reactive. This is the detail that most popular treatments of Gnostic cosmology miss entirely. They respond. They adjust. They attempt to prevent souls from remembering their origin because a soul that remembers its origin stops being fuel for the system. So what does conventional prayer look like from the Archon's vantage point? It looks like the signal they want. A soul below, petitioning through the hierarchy, acknowledging its own smallness. That's the system working as designed. What does invoking Noria look like? That's a different signal entirely. And I can tell you from direct experience that the reaction is different too. I need to be precise about what happened. I'm not claiming supernatural fireworks. I'm not building toward a miraculous testimony. I'm telling you what I observed. I'd spent several weeks at this point in deep reading of the hypostasis of the Archons. Not casual reading, I mean the kind of sitting where you read a paragraph, close the document, stare at the wall, think about it, come back, read it again. The kind of reading where the text starts speaking in your direction rather than just at you. I had the thought of Noria open in a parallel tab, cross-referencing how the same figure was treated across 2 different tractates, looking for the thread that connected them. And I kept returning to this specific moment in the hypostasis of the Archons, where the Archons approach Noria and she calls out. Not silently, not internally. The text implies a voiced declaration, a direct naming of her connection to the highest God. And the Archons recoil. I sat with that for a long time. Later that night, genuinely, it was late, probably past midnight, I found myself in the position I usually default to when I'm working through something I can't resolve conceptually. I'd started to do what I always do, frame it as a question addressed upward. Something like, what is this? What does this mean? The prayer posture, basically, without the religious vocabulary. And I stopped myself midway through it, because I just spent hours reading about a figure whose defining characteristic is that she doesn't do that. Noria doesn't petition. Noria calls out. Noria declares her origin. She names where she's from, not what she needs. So instead of completing the question, I said her name. Just that, out loud, into the silence of the room. Noria. What happened next was not a vision. It was not a voice. It was something more interior and more difficult to explain, which is exactly why I'm going to try to explain it precisely rather than collapse it into language that sounds impressive. There was a quality of attention in the room that changed. Not the room physically, the quality of what felt like it was listening. In the prayer mode, the quality of whatever was listening felt like it was above, distant, patient in the way something powerful is patient when it doesn't need to hurry. After I said her name, the quality of what was listening felt like it came from the same level as me, alongside, not distant, not above in the hierarchical sense, present in the way another person in a room with you is present. And then, and this is the part I keep returning to, there was a quality of interference, a kind of static in the interior of whatever that attention space was. Not peaceful, agitated. The closest analogy I can build is that it felt like the signal I was producing had run into something that didn't want it to propagate, like tuning to a frequency that someone else is actively trying to jam. I'm not dressing this up. I stayed with it. The static didn't dissolve the connection. It confirmed it in a strange way. Because the Gnostic texts are explicit, the Archons react to the signal of awakening. They don't react to petition, they react to recognition. The agitation I felt wasn't mine. It was responsive. Something was responding to the act of invoking Noria the way the Archons in the text respond to Noria herself, not with indifference, but with pressure. And that pressure told me more about the structure of this cosmology than 3 more weeks of reading would have. One viewer, commenting on my video about the reincarnation trap, wrote something that captured exactly what I was sitting with that night. They said, "It's not that I stopped believing in God. It's that I started suspecting the thing I was praying to wasn't what I thought it was. That's not apostasy. That's gnosis beginning to move. That's the recognition that the Gnostic texts are not describing doctrine. They're describing the mechanics of something you can actually encounter." So let me now go deeper into what Noria's name functionally represents in the cosmological structure, because the experience I had makes a lot more sense once you understand what invocation actually is and why it's categorically different from prayer. So let's go there. Let's actually unpack what Noria is within the Gnostic cosmological architecture, because most people who encounter her name in passing treat it like a footnote, a minor character, a curiosity from an obscure text. That's the wrong frame entirely. Noria appears most prominently in a text called The Reality of the Rulers, also known as the Hypostasis of the Archons, discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945. She also surfaces in the Apocryphon of John, in certain Sethian cosmological fragments, and is echoed in texts associated with the tradition of the Holy Seed. And what she represents, once you actually sit with the texts, is not a character in a story. She is a function, a cosmic principle embodied as a figure. Here's the short version, and then I'll unpack what it means. In the hypostasis of the Archons, the lower rulers, the fabricators of the material world, attempt to violate Noria. They try to bring her under their dominion, and she resists, completely. Not through submission, not through petition, not through asking a higher power to intervene on her behalf. She calls out, she invokes, and the divine responds not as an external rescuer, but as something that was already present in her, recognized through her cry. The text says the great angel Eleleth descends to her aid. But read it carefully. What the angel tells Norea is not, "You are saved." What he tells her is who she already is. He reveals her nature to her, her true parentage, her origin outside the Archon's domain. That's not a rescue story, that's a recognition story. And that distinction, rescue versus recognition, is the entire engine of what I'm trying to get at here. Because when you pray in the conventional mode, you are structuring the relationship as a rescue. You are the endangered party. The divine is the distant power that may or may not intervene. The Archons, in that framing, have functional authority over your situation, and the best you can do is appeal past them to something higher. That's the architecture of petition. That's what most people mean when they say prayer. But invocation in the Gnostic sense does something categorically different. When Norea calls out, she is not asking for help from outside herself. She is activating the recognition of what she already is. The Archons cannot violate her because she is not, at her fundamental level, under their jurisdiction. Her true nature, her divine spark, her pneumatic origin, precedes and exceeds their fabricated order. The invocation doesn't create that reality, it surfaces it. Now here's where it gets cosmically significant. The Archons in Gnostic cosmology are not evil in the Hollywood sense. They're not demons twirling their capes. They're more unsettling than that, actually. They are lower-order administrators of a material reality constructed in ignorance. They operate according to rules, patterns, jurisdictions. And those jurisdictions are real. They apply to anything that operates within their frequency, so to speak. What makes Norea remarkable is not that she fights them, it's that she operates outside their frequency by virtue of what she is. Her name functions as a key because it points to a category of being that the Archons cannot fully process. Their authority is over matter, over psychic patterns, over the mechanisms of fear and repetition and unconscious compliance. It does not extend to the pneumatic spark, the divine fire that was breathed into the human being before the demiurge's architecture was imposed. So when you speak her name, when you invoke Norea, you are not performing a religious ritual. You are not making a request. You are pointing at something. You are directing attention toward a category of your own being that exists prior to and outside the archontic order. And that pointing, that re-identification, is what the Gnostic teachers meant by a name that carries power. Not magic in the folk sense, ontological declaration in the deepest sense. I want to be precise about what I mean, because this is where people either follow or lose the thread. Knowledge in the Gnostic framework is not information. It's not knowing facts about the divine. It's the direct interior recognition of your own origin. Gnosis, the word itself. And a name in this tradition is a compressed form of that recognition. To speak a name with understanding is to invoke the reality the name points to. The Archons have names too, names that in certain texts are given specifically so that practitioners can identify and navigate past them. The Gnostic tradition understood naming as a form of cosmological cartography. You name something to locate it, to understand your relationship to it, to know whether it has authority over you or not. Norea's name, in this context, is a declaration that there is a category of human being the Archons cannot reach. And saying it, understanding it, is the act of identifying yourself as belonging to that category. I want to tell you what actually happened that night. Not as a supernatural testimony, not as a claim designed to impress you. I want to be precise about what happened because the precision is what makes it useful. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Talk, and I've covered a lot of territory on this channel about the Gnostic cosmological structure, the Archon mechanics, the reincarnation architecture, the demiurge's relationship to matter and soul. But that night I was sitting with the hypostasis of the Archons specifically, not for the first time, but for the first time with a different question. I wasn't asking what the text meant in an academic sense. I was asking what it meant functionally. What does it mean to actually encounter what this text is describing, rather than just comprehend it intellectually? I'd been reading for a while when I said Norea's name aloud, just spoke it into the room. Not as a prayer, not with a request attached to it. Just the name, said deliberately, as an act of attention. And something shifted. I want to be careful here. I'm not claiming a vision. I'm not claiming a voice from a light. What I noticed, and I noticed it immediately, was a quality of resistance. Not in the room, but internally. Something that felt like friction. Like a current that had been running smoothly in one direction suddenly encountered something that complicated it. And underneath the friction, or maybe through it, was something that felt clarifying, quieter, more rooted. Now, if you've read my earlier video, the one I put out about the Gnostic silence test, where I described something similar, you'll know I don't reach for dramatic language easily. When something internal happens, I try to describe it in terms of qualities and changes, not in terms of supernatural event categories. Because the language of supernatural events is itself a trap in a way. It externalizes what is fundamentally an interior movement. So here's what I can say with precision. The friction I felt was not random. It was directional. It was the quality of something being identified and therefore losing its ambient authority. The Archons, in Gnostic phenomenology, operate most effectively when they are unrecognized. When their patterns, fear, compulsion, unconscious repetition, the reflexive hunger to appeal to external authority run through you without your awareness, they have full jurisdiction. The moment of recognition is the moment their jurisdiction becomes conditional. And saying Norea's name was, in that moment, an act of recognition. Not of her exactly, of what she represents, of the category of being she names. The friction was the archontic pattern encountering a signal it couldn't fully process. I don't expect you to take my word for that. I'm not asking you to. What I'm asking you to do is sit with the structure of what I'm describing and see whether it maps onto something you've experienced. Because here's what I found, having read hundreds of comments on this channel over the past months. The people who resonate most deeply with this material are not people who are encountering these ideas for the first time and finding them exotic. They're people who find these ideas providing a framework for something they've already lived, something they already felt and had no language for. That's not coincidence. That's the pneumatic recognition the Gnostic texts describe. You don't convince someone of gnosis. You name something that was already moving in them. And the friction I felt that night, I've come to understand it through the lens of what the hypostasis of the Archons describes. The Archons attempted to claim Noria. The text is specific about that. They approached her with the authority of the rulers of the material world, expecting the response they always get: submission, fear, petition, compliance. And what they encountered instead was a refusal grounded not in defiance, but in origin. She didn't say, "I fight you." She said effectively, "You have no jurisdiction here." And then the recognition of her true nature crystallized through the invocation. That sequence, archontic pressure, refusal grounded in identity, crystallization of origin, is what I felt compressed into a few minutes sitting with a book in a quiet room. Here's what I think is actually happening when practitioners of various traditions report resistance or interference when they begin to move toward interior gnosis. It's not that darker forces hate the spiritually advanced. It's simpler and more mechanical than that. The archontic patterns, and you can understand these psychologically if the cosmological frame feels too large, are patterns of unconscious compliance, repetition, and external authority seeking that have a kind of self-preserving momentum. When you introduce a signal that names their nature and points outside their domain, you get friction. Not because they're fighting you, because you've introduced something they weren't built to accommodate. Norea's name is that signal, compressed. Let's make the contrast as clean as possible, because I think there's a version of this conversation that stays vague, and vague is comfortable but useless. So let's be precise. Prayer, in the conventional structure, positions the practitioner as a petitioner. You are the one in need. The divine is the one with power. The relationship is hierarchical by design, and the hierarchy places you below. Now, within certain traditions, this is framed as appropriate humility, as right relationship between creature and creator. And I understand that framing. I grew up inside it. It's not nothing. The emotional experience of surrender, of releasing your grip on outcomes, is real and has genuine psychological value. I'm not dismissing it entirely. But here's what that version structurally cannot do. It cannot address the Gnostic question. Because the Gnostic question is not, how do I get the divine to help me? The Gnostic question is, who is doing the praying? What is the nature of the entity that reaches upward? And if that entity's true nature is itself divine, if the divine spark within the human being is not a fragment of the demiurge's creation, but a piece of the original pleroma, the fullness that existed before the fabricated world, then prayer to the demiurge or to the archons is not getting you closer to that recognition. It's confirming a misidentification. That's not a minor adjustment to theology. That's a complete structural inversion. Invocation, in the Gnostic sense, does not ask, it identifies. Where prayer moves upward towards something external, invocation moves inward towards something original. Where prayer emphasizes need, invocation emphasizes origin. Where prayer positions you as a subject of the divine order, invocation positions you as a participant in the divine nature. And this is where the Archons become relevant again. Because the archontic structure, the fabricated material and psychic order, is maintained precisely through the misidentification. If you believe that you are fundamentally a creature of the material world, that your spirit is a local product of biological processes or demiurgic fabrication, then the Archons have something to work with. Your fear is real. Your sense of separation is real. Your impulse to petition an external power is real because you've accepted the premise of your own powerlessness. But if you invoke, if you speak a name that points to the category of your true nature, you are not changing external circumstances. You are relocating the ground you stand on. And from that relocated ground, the archontic patterns no longer have the same grip. Now, I want to bring in something from the Apocryphon of John here, because it frames this with unusual precision. In that text, the divine voice, described as existing in three forms, Father, Mother, and Son, or alternatively as the triple-powered one, speaks directly to the one who is awakening and says something that has always stayed with me. The identification offered is not, "You are saved." It's, "I am the one who is with you always. I am the Father. I am the Mother. I am the Son." The divine is not presenting itself as external. It's presenting itself as the one who has always been present in you, through you, as the deepest layer of what you are. That's not prayer receiving an answer. That's invocation collapsing the assumed distance. Here's the analogy that finally cracked this open for me after one of those long reading sessions. Imagine a mirror that's been covered in dust for so long that the people looking at it have forgotten it was ever a mirror. They've started using it as a wall. They knock on it, hoping something on the other side will respond. They leave offerings in front of it. They organize their behavior around the approval of whatever is behind it. But the mirror was never a wall. There is no other side. The divine they're petitioning was always the thing they were made of, looking back. Prayer, in the archontic architecture, keeps the dust on the mirror. It keeps you addressing the wall rather than recognizing the surface. Invocation is the act of wiping the mirror, or more precisely, of remembering that the mirror is what you are. Norea's name works this way, not as magic, as a precision instrument of re-identification. I personally think this is the most underrated dimension of the Nag Hammadi material. Not the cosmological mythology, stunning as that is, but this practical architecture of invocation that runs underneath all of it. The mythology is the map. The invocation is the movement the map is describing. Most people who study these texts spend their time on the map and never make the movement. That's not an accident. A map you're allowed to study keeps you occupied. A movement you actually make changes your functional relationship to the archontic order. Only one of those is threatening to the system. I'll say that once and not belabor it. But it's worth sitting with. Viewer comments on my video about the reincarnation trap have circled this territory repeatedly. One viewer wrote, and this one has stayed with me, "I've read more about Gnosticism than most people I know, but I realized I've been treating it like a philosophy course. Something changed when I stopped analyzing and just sat with the name." That distinction, analyzing versus sitting with, is exactly the move the style of invocation requires. You're not solving a problem, you're inhabiting a recognition. So what does the practice actually look like? Because I said earlier that understanding the invocation conceptually is only half of it. And I meant that. The conceptual architecture we've been building, the distinction between petition and recognition, the cosmological function of Noria's name, the mechanics of how the archontic patterns respond to identification, all of that is preparation. It's the map. Now let's talk about the movement. I want to be upfront about something first. I'm not going to give you a ritual. That's not what this is, and that's not what the Gnostic texts are offering when they describe invocation. What I'm going to give you is a structural orientation, three components that appear consistently in Gnostic invocation practice, drawn from the texts themselves, that together constitute what invocation is as a functional act. You apply the structure. The recognition comes from inside you, not from me. The first component is stillness of identification. Not physical stillness, though that helps. Stillness of identification means pausing the normal stream of self-description. I am this person with these problems, in this situation, needing this outcome, and dwelling in the question underneath all of that. Before the character with the name and the problems, what is the nature of the awareness that observes all of it? This is not abstract philosophy as an intellectual exercise. This is a practical act of attention. In the Apocryphon of John, before any revelation is delivered, there is this moment of the seeker's framework collapsing. The questions they came in with dissolve, and what remains is something quieter and more fundamental. That's the quality of stillness I'm pointing at, not emptiness, foundational attention. The second component is the invocation of the name itself. You speak Norea's name, and in the older texts, the fuller invocation includes the names of the divine powers associated with her lineage, the Sethian heritage, the connection to the incorruptible realm above the Archon's domain. But the name itself carries the orientation. When you say it, you are not addressing an external entity in the way prayer addresses an external deity. You are naming a category. You are saying, there is a domain of being that precedes the archontic fabrication. There is a mode of the human being that the rulers of matter cannot claim, and I am identifying with that. The act of naming, done with that understanding, is the invocation. It's not the word by itself, it's the word understood, spoken with the weight of what it means. And here's what I observed in my own practice, and what I've heard echoed in comments from people who've worked with this material directly. There is often a quality of resistance that arises at precisely this moment. Not always external resistance, sometimes it's purely interior, a kind of static, a pulling back toward the familiar. The habit of petition is strong, and the moment you begin to move into the mode of identification rather than request, something in the psychic architecture pushes back. That's the archontic friction I described earlier. It's actually useful to know about in advance, because if you don't know about it, it derails you. You mistake the resistance for a sign that you're doing something wrong, when in fact, you're doing something that is working precisely because it's meeting friction. The third component is what the texts describe as the hearing. In the hypostasis of the Archons, after Norea invokes and the great angel Alelith descends, the communication that follows is not instruction from outside. It's revelation of what was already true. Alelith does not give Norea new information about herself. He surfaces the information she needed to recognize. The hearing, in Gnostic invocation, is the moment of that surfacing. It may come immediately. It may come much later, sometimes hours, sometimes over days. It is not a voice necessarily, though some practitioners describe something voice-like. More precisely, it is a shift in the quality of self-knowledge. Something that was opaque becomes transparent. A pattern you were living inside becomes visible as a pattern. An identification that was running automatically becomes something you can see and therefore choose. Those three components, stillness of identification, the invocation of the name with understanding, and the receptivity to the hearing, constitute what the Gnostic tradition is pointing at when it describes invocation as distinct from prayer. And this is where I want to directly address the Archons' reaction that I described earlier. Because I think the way I framed it initially, the Archons reacted immediately, might sound dramatic in a way that suggests external supernatural event. It wasn't that. It was more like this. The moment the invocation moved the ground I was standing on from petition to identification, every pattern in me that was built around petition became suddenly visible as a pattern. The anxiety then pleading structure that I'd been running so long it felt like the texture of consciousness itself, it became visible. And visible things don't have the same authority as invisible things. That's the reaction. The patterns surfaced because the light of identification hit them directly. And that surfacing, that sudden visibility, felt like something from outside because it was so discontinuous with the normal flow of interior experience. But it wasn't from outside. It was from underneath, from the layer the Archons can't reach. That's what Norea's name points to. That's what speaking it, really speaking it, with the weight of the cosmological understanding behind it actually does. Not miracles, not rescue, recognition. The oldest move in the Gnostic playbook, and still the most powerful one. So let me bring this all the way down to the ground. Not cosmology, not history, not theory. What do you actually do with this? Because that's the question I kept returning to in the weeks after that night, after I said Norea's name in the silence, and watched something in me shift in a way I still don't fully have words for. The intellectual framework was solid. The textual evidence was there. The Apocryphon of John, the reality of the rulers, the texts that survived the burning and the banning and the centuries of deliberate erasure, They all pointed to the same architecture. But knowing the architecture and living inside it are two different things. Here's what the Gnostic tradition is actually asking you to do. Not to pray harder, not to surrender more completely, not to hollow yourself out further in the hope that something merciful will fill the space. That's the demiurgic script. That's what the Archons built. The system that requires your ongoing petition is a system that requires your ongoing smallness. Noria refused that. That's the entire point of her story. When the Archons came for her, when the full weight of the constructed world tried to claim her, tried to fold her back into the obedience structure, she didn't petition the light. She didn't ask for help in the posture of someone who doubted whether help was coming. She called to the light as someone who already knew what she was, as someone who understood that the light wasn't above her, wasn't external to her, wasn't a favor to be granted. It was her origin. It was her substance. It was what she was made of before the world had any say in the matter. And that call, that act of recognition spoken outward, that's what broke the Archons' hold. Not power, recognition. That distinction is everything. I personally think this is the most underrated concept in all of Gnostic literature. Not the drama of the demiurge, not the labyrinthine cosmology of the pleroma, not even the radical claim about the nature of Christ. It's this. That recognition, spoken with full understanding of what you actually are, is more threatening to the architecture of control than any ritual, any practice, any sustained program of spiritual discipline. Because rituals can be co-opted, disciplines can be commodified, but genuine recognition of divine origin that can't be taxed, can't be institutionalized, can't be sold back to you in a different package, can't exactly put a collection plate in front of someone's internal awakening. Just saying. And that's why it was suppressed. Not because it was dangerous nonsense, because it was dangerous truth. So here's what I want you to take from this. Not a technique, not a 5-step process. The practice is simpler and harder than that simultaneously. Learn the cosmology, not as trivia, not as a system to admire from a distance. I covered the full architecture of the Archons, what they are, how they operate, what they're actually doing when you feel that low-frequency interference in your own perception. In my video, You Won't Be Judged After You Die. The Archons do this instead. If you haven't watched that one, I'd start there, because what I'm describing here only lands fully when you understand what you're recognizing yourself against. But the point is this. When you speak Noria's name, or when you sit with the reality that her name names, that there is a pneumatic element in you that was never under archonic jurisdiction, never subject to the demiurge's claim, never native to the constructed world. Something in the machinery of unconscious compliance loses its grip. Not permanently without practice, not effortlessly, but the loosening is real. I've felt it. I've watched other people describe it in terms that are too specific and too consistent to be coincidental. The Archons reacted immediately, not because I invoked something from outside, because I stopped pretending something from inside wasn't there. That's the whole move. Stop petitioning, start recognizing. You were never a creature waiting for rescue. You were a spark of the pleroma that agreed, before birth, before this name, before this body, to take on the weight of forgetting, to descend into the density of the material world, and to find your way back to knowing what you were all along. Noria remembered. The Archons couldn't stand it. You can remember too, and they won't be able to stand that either. I'm Daniel, and this is Gnostic Talk. If this video reached something in you, something that already knew this before I said it, let me know by commenting, I remembered.